On Friday, there were actually 2 people who are being subject to questioning. One of them is Lance Corporal Joe Glenton, who is facing a court-martial for refusing to go to fight in Afghanistan. And of course, he faces a number of years in prison as a result of taking what I believe is a very brave and a very principled stand over this issue. The other, of course, is Tony Blair, who probably doesn't face years in prison for having taken a very unprincipled stand of driving the cause for war, of allying with George Bush more than a year before we had the war, and agreeing that that war was going to go ahead regardless of evidence, regardless of public opinion, regardless of legal opinion, regardless of any of those things. It seems that Blair, so far, has been completely free of any constraint. In fact, he has a job, one of his many jobs, working for banks and big business, and some of whom, of course, have benefited directly from the war and the invasion in Iraq. But he has a job, among other things, as the envoy for peace in the Middle East, perhaps one of the most disgusting appointments of recent years. But you can be certain that the establishment is doing everything that it can, from preventing Rose Gentle, the woman who has done more than any other of the people who've lost their children in Afghanistan. She's been prevented from actually being in the room itself with Blair, and I think is the only member of a military family who's been not allowed into the actual room where Blair is appearing. And when you compare what is happening with her, when you compare what is happening with Blair, and when you compare what's happening with Joe Glenton, then I think you can see exactly who is getting the favourable treatment here. And this is particularly astonishing because if you look at the Chilcot inquiry, as Tony Benn said, I think that whatever reservations, and I think we all have to have very, very serious reservations about the Chilcot inquiry, after all, it isn't allowing disclosure of many, many documents. It's not being given documents. It's not really challenging the government over this question. But Chilcot has, in the course of the inquiry, all sorts of things have come out which I'm sure the government didn't want to come out. And particularly this week, it is really quite amazing to learn that Jack Straw was told by his legal advisor 2 months before the war happened that the war was unlawful, was illegal, and that any war against Iraq would be illegal. I understand that Jack Straw thought this was vague, that the legal advice that he was given was vague, and of course international law probably is one of the least vague areas of law in terms of much of it is written down in treaties and statutes and all this kind of thing. But of course what it meant was that Jack Straw didn't want to take this advice. Lord Goldsmith today claimed that he changed his mind. He thought at first maybe the war was illegal, but he then came to the view that it was legal, and he said he changed his mind after talking to American lawyers. Well, you know, he went to Washington and met some of George Bush's lawyers. Well, this does almost kind of beg a belief, really, that they've done this. And as Tony Benn said, all the Foreign Office lawyers, all of them said that this was an illegal war. Now, isn't it quite incredible that despite all the lawyers saying this legal advice was disregarded by Tony Blair, by the cabinet members who knew about it, and they were determined to go to war? What a complete shame that is on the British government. What a terrible thing it is that this has happened. However sceptical you might be about some of the workings of government, you would think that this kind of legal advice would be something that even governments would have to listen to. What we have learned over the last 7 years in this country is that they did not listen, or they decided to ignore every single bit of this legal advice. And that, it seems to me, is not only a damning indictment, but if you look at everything that the Chilcot inquiry is now talking about, everything that we said about this war 7 or 8 years ago, and what we said about the Afghan war, these things have been proved to be true, and what they said about the war has proved to be lies. And this shouldn't be a question of just simply one more inquiry. There has to be an outcome, which means that the people who have pursued this campaign, who have told the truth, who have tried to get at the truth, whether it's the military families or the people like Glenn Rangwala, who said at the very beginning that the dossier was completely wrong, or any of these questions, there has to be a way that there can be some justice over these questions. And it seems to me that one of the things that we have to demand is a complete holding to account of Jack Straw, of Jeff Hoon, of Tony Blair, and all the other people who behaved in this way. If they could do this when 2 million people marched on the streets, when every lawyer told them it was wrong, when public opinion was against it, what are they going to do further in Afghanistan? What will they do when they want to attack Iran? And if we do not have full accounting over Iraq, we can never be certain that these things will not happen again. And we can march as much as we want, but we have to also say there has to be some outcome which does say that Tony Blair should not be the Middle East peace envoy, that he has no reputation any longer as anybody with any honesty or integrity. This is a government decision that we can't demonstrate where Tony Blair is coming into the conference. It's a government decision backed up by the police that we cannot do these things. And unfortunately, we have seen repeatedly the police and the government trying to curtail civil liberties, the right to protest, and all of these things. And this is what they are doing on Friday. We have seen surveillance of young people. We have seen the people on the Palestine demos round about a year ago who are still going through a trial process, many of them still going through a trial process. The ones who have pleaded guilty are getting very, very long sentences. By coincidence, nearly all of them are young Muslim people who are being banged up for something like nearly 2 years for going on a demonstration. And this is set to do one thing. It's set to intimidate people from going on demonstrations. It's set to say to people, you don't have the right to go on a demonstration. And you know, people have fought for the right to demonstrate in this country for hundreds of years. And one thing you learn when you organise demonstrations is you have to keep fighting. That you never win this absolute right, and you have to go back time and time again until you have won this right. And I'm saying now, we have the right to demonstrate outside the Queen Elizabeth II Centre on Friday or any other day, and they don't mind any other day. It's just by coincidence that suddenly this week, when Tony Blair's appearing, that suddenly they're complaining about people demonstrating outside. We did it when Alistair Campbell was there. We did it when the conference opened. They didn't mind any of these things, but suddenly they're saying we can't do it. Because we have to assert this right to protest. It is so important that the people who have said all along that the war was wrong have the right to demonstrate where they want, when they want, and against whom they want. And the fact that Tony Blair, in my opinion, Blair has put these conditions down. He said he doesn't want a big angry demonstration outside. He doesn't want the placards with BLAIR on it. Well, we are determined that those placards with BLAIR on them will be on every television screen in every newspaper around the world, because that's what we want them to do. When you have political parties like UKIP who are now saying they want to ban the burqa, this is playing to the worst elements of racism and Islamophobia in this country. And it's designed to say to the Muslim community, you will be punished if you dare to protest, if you dare to stand up, and you dare to speak, and you dare to do any of these things. We are not having this, and therefore we have to campaign against it, because we know where this ends. When you start banning what clothes people wear, if you start banning their religion, this is what happened in Germany in the 1930s, and it is not going to happen here in Britain. And we have to build a mass campaign to make sure that it doesn't happen. At the same time that they say they're protecting us from terrorism, they are cynically knowing and saying even that they will have to talk to at least the moderate Taliban. Now, this tells you exactly what the cynical operation is. They carry on about the threat of terrorism, about Muslim extremists and all this. At the same time, they know this war will end in negotiation. But at what cost in terms of human lives? At what cost in terms of the instability of the system? At what cost in terms of all these things? What kind of a society are we that never questions the need to go to war, that never questions the cost of war, that never questions all of these things, but never has the money to look after the poorest children in this society? And the same people who've gone, the children in Iraq and Afghanistan are the same people who don't give a damn about the poorest people in this society. That is what we're fighting against. So I hope you will join us in the next 2 days and do everything you can to send a message to Tony Blair and all those people who support him. We are going to keep on your case until justice is really done. And that will be done by the people of this country, not by these tribunals.